we had a bail-in in Cyprus, right? Meaning if you had your money in the banks closed for 2 to 3 weeks in the European financial crisis, and when they reopened, when you had more than 100K in your bank account, the state just took some amount of it, right? And it was just gone.
What?
Yeah. So I actually looked that up prior to our chat here. When you had more than 100K in your bank account on Cyprus, right, which is part of the European Union, the state took 47% of your money above 100K and used that as a bail-in for the state, right? So as a European, right, of course, I'm based in Germany, so everyone is always like, yeah, we have solid finances in Germany. But I was like,
Yeah.
listen, this is not a third world country where this just happens. Part of us, right, of the EU. So that was a big milestone for me to learn about.
Alrighty, welcome back to the show. Today we've got Philipp Weiling from Botanix. Philipp, welcome to the show. How are you doing today, man?
Thanks for having me. Doing fine. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. It's a bright and sunny morning here in California. I believe you're based in Europe, right? Are you still out in Europe?
Yeah, I'm based in Germany. I think last time we met was in Denver, right?
It was, yeah. It was top of the year for ETH Denver. I remember it was a great event. Thank you so much for coming out and speaking on our panel. And it's great to see you again. It's great to have you on the show, man.
Yeah, likewise.
All right, so we're going to kick it off. The general layout of the show, as we spoke about before, we want to get to know you a little bit, want to learn about what you're doing and what problem you're solving in the industry, and then we'll talk a little bit about your future vision. So just to get into it, Philipp, do you mind telling us just a little bit about yourself, kind of how you got into blockchain, specifically into Bitcoin and Botanix? I would really love to hear too. But a lot of people that I talk to come from non-technical backgrounds, non-crypto, non-blockchain backgrounds, and they end up in this industry. And I find it really interesting to learn kind of what that journey looks like and how that happened. And I know you spoke on our panel, and I remember you mentioning specifically that you weren't a very technical person. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about your journey, how you got into Web3, and really what brought you to where you are now.
Yeah, happy to chat about it a little bit. I mean, the question is how much time do we have, right?
Yeah.
Mostly it's quite a journey for people to actually land really in Bitcoin, right? I think it's not a one-off moment. I mean, maybe for some, but certainly not for me. So I think how I got into Bitcoin specifically is a mix of things, and it certainly started with my financial education. My academic background actually is in finance.
Okay.
And that made me learn about the traditional financial system, right? That sometimes in crypto we smile a bit upon, right? And I think it started with all that. And then the education on some of the probably most critical things in Bitcoin, which is what is actually sound money, what's a store of value, and what does it mean to have sovereignty over your money, right? So I think these kind of things I learned over quite some years, and maybe for background, but I joined the workforce in 2012. So I think the events that helped me most to learn about Bitcoin were the European financial crisis in 2013. And then I think COVID for most of us, right? But it started with the European financial crisis where I don't know how many from the listeners that are not based in Europe actually know this, but where we had a bail-in Cyprus, right? Meaning if you had your money in the banks closed for 2 to 3 weeks in the European financial crisis. And when they reopened, when you had more than 100K in your bank account, the state just took some amount of it, right? And it was just gone.
What?
Yeah. So I actually looked that up prior to our chat here. When you had more than 100K in your bank account on Cyprus, right, which is part of the European Union, the state took 47% of your money above 100K and use that as a bail-in for the state, right? So as a European, right, of course, I'm based in Germany, so everyone is always like, yeah, we have solid finances in Germany. But I was like,
Yeah.
listen, this is not a third world country where this just happens. It's part of us, right, of the EU. So that
Yeah.
was a big milestone for me to learn about what does it actually mean to um, have responsibility also in taking custody of your assets, right? And in that case,
Yeah.
having sovereignty over your money. So
When you mention sovereignty, like I feel like that's not a topic that you talk about in traditional financial education. I feel like that's the core reason why Bitcoin was invented, was to have sovereignty over our money. Um, looks like my recording is a little bit stuck here. But yeah, it's really interesting to hear you say that from a traditional education perspective when you talk about finances. I feel like that's really what changed a lot of people's mentality and got them into Bitcoin and to blockchain as a whole, is that I want to have sovereignty. I want to be able to control what happens with my money. And we started to realize that like traditional banking rails, as long as they might have worked very well, we've come to a point where we can do those same things faster, easier, but most importantly within our own control, which doesn't seem to be like a concern for traditional finance. That just historically that hasn't really been a concern. So it's really interesting to hear you say that as like a core part of your financial education is to focus on the sovereignty piece, which
yeah,
is really cool.
for sure. I mean, unfortunately, I didn't buy any Bitcoin back then, right? But it was just one step, which is why I'm saying it's a process, and I guess a long process for most people. But then
Yeah.
seeing it combined with currency debasement in COVID, right? The combination
Yeah.
of both, I think, then is for Bitcoiners it clicked for me, right?
You start connecting the dots.
When you experience both, and then we all know the saying of follow the money. You're like, okay, I can't unsee it, right? Mm.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I don't want to make it even longer, but these two in combination, right, and the background that I had in traditional finance, make me realize that I don't think this financial system is sustainable, and that there
Mhm.
is a way out.
Awesome. So that was initially what got you interested in Bitcoin. You've been in the industry for a while now, and you didn't actually start in Bitcoin, right? Because I think I connected with your story when you first told us during the panel. And the reason I connected was because I learned about Bitcoin probably in like 2015, 2016, and I didn't buy it then either. I was working in tech. I was working in marketing for Samsung, for a major electronics company, and I learned about Bitcoin, but it was still magic internet money for me. I was still like, I'm working in real technology. That's just like fake internet money. I can't hold it. I can't trust it. And it took a while for me to really get into even like Ethereum. I think made it a little bit easier for people to trade, and then NFTs happened, and it just became a lot more fun and engaging and easy for me to do more stuff on chain. Whereas Bitcoin was still kind of like a little bit vague and a little bit blurry for me, and I didn't understand quite how to engage in that ecosystem and where the value lied. And it took me a while to really find that value in Bitcoin. Now we're starting to see the evolution and a lot of L2s and different ways to like engage within the Bitcoin ecosystem. But can you tell me a little bit about what was that journey like? Like you got into blockchain, into cryptocurrency, I believe on the EVM side, and then you transitioned more like back into Bitcoin.
Yeah. And this is going to be a first. So I'm going to be fully transparent with the audience here, which is
All right.
I joined as a retail participant in 2016, right, in Bitcoin, when I was still
Yep.
working for a spirits company, right? So I have almost 10 years outside of crypto doing business development jobs. And I didn't even work despite my background in the financial industry. So I was joining Bitcoin 2016 when I was working for a spirits company, and then you had the run up in 2017, and I was like,
Mhm.
man, I would love to work in that industry. But we're gonna get to that, right? Non-technical background, right? And back in 17, you don't know whether that's for real, the whole Bitcoin thing, right? So the bubble burst, and then there goes my dream to work in crypto, right?
Yep.
But I couldn't let go of it. And then I probably had like 3 years of just going down the rabbit hole. And then I was fortunate that it was in 2020 that my company at that point in time, which was still a consumer company, let go of everyone in Europe, Middle East, and Asia.
Oh
So
wow.
I was taken care of with some money, right, that I didn't need to worry about a couple of months' payments, right? So I was like,
Hmm.
okay, it's now or never. And then, again, being completely honest, there was just nothing in Bitcoin that I could do as a non-technical person, right? There was no business
Yeah.
position open in any company. So I was looking around, what is there, right? And I joined the crypto industry at Polygon. And people who've been around know that in 2020, 2021, Polygon was really hot, and there were all these enterprise deals, right, with big brands. People remember Starbucks and whatnot.
Yeah.
And that was freaking exciting. I loved it, right? I
Yeah.
loved it. It was my foot in the door into the industry, and I never really looked back. However, I think we all have the private individual and then the professional, right? So on the
Yeah.
private side, it was still all Bitcoin, but on the professional side, it was EVM. Um, and then, long story short, after 3 years as BD director at Polygon, finally, end of last year, it was time for something new, and that is when I joined Botanix.
That is awesome. Well, congratulations on the transition on getting into Botanix. Um, that's really fun. I think this is why we vibe. I have a very similar journey. I started building a retail protocol, a DApp, on Polygon just because I wanted to build an EVM. I started learning Solidity. I was trading on ETH, and I realized, like everyone did, that ETH is too expensive if you want to build like an actual retail application that runs microtransactions all day. And so Polygon, like you said, it was very, very hot. It was like 2019, 2020. I started building this, and that was my first place. I was like, all right, I can build it on Polygon. It's the same thing, but it's cheaper. There's going to be options to like launch your own chains. Like it was by far the hottest thing. They were very early in like the multi-chain L2 idea, the concept, at least very, very early on. So yeah, I can see where that core transition happened, where you go from like liking the industry, liking the concept and the idea. EVM, especially Polygon, was a little bit cheaper version of the EVM where you can experiment, ideate. There's a lot of attention, and then I feel like everybody over the last year, maybe 2 years, has, there's been two big topics of conversation, two big narratives. One obviously has been AI, and the other one is the return of Bitcoin. Everybody's coming to Bitcoin. They want to build L2s, they want to build staking solutions. Just there's so many things. Everybody's trying to bring DeFi to Bitcoin. So let's get into the second portion. I would love to learn a little bit more about Botanix. I know you guys very recently launched mainnet, I believe just last month in July of 2025. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about how you guys see the problem of getting people onto Bitcoin, getting people engaged within the ecosystem, and how you make that a little bit easier for retail users, and how you stay true to the ethos of Bitcoin at Botanix. So yeah, in your words, if you can explain to me a little bit more about Botanix and how you view what you guys are doing.
Yeah. So in short, what is Botanix? It's a Bitcoin scaling solution, right? We are building for a world running on Bitcoin. And when we launched as a full-fledged financial ecosystem that is running on Bitcoin. I think it brings together what we talked about a little bit earlier, which is you want to have the security and the decentralization piece of Bitcoin, but you want to have the user experience and the smart contracting from the EVM side, right? And we'll
Yeah.
probably get into more detail how that actually works, because so far people have mostly said it's impossible, which is why you need two ecosystems working in parallel, but not actually stacking on top of each other. And that's what we're trying to do here. And if that's of interest, we can double click on how that works exactly.
Dude, absolutely. I think you make a great point, right? That's really what people want, is the security, the decentralization of Bitcoin, and especially with like Bitcoin maxis, right? They don't want to get away from the only chain that they trust to stay decentralized and they believe is secure. But everybody wants the flexibility of EVM. So yeah, I would love to learn a little bit more about how you guys solve that
Yeah,
issue.
yeah. I'll actually take you back into my own process of reviewing Botanix when thinking about, should I join this team, yes or no, right?
Yeah,
Because I
please.
think that to me at least, and I think to Botanix, there was a reason why no scaling solution on Bitcoin has taken off yet, right? It had mass
Hmm.
appeal. And these are also key characteristics of how we approach things at Botanix. So let's go down the list of, let's start with security and decentralization. So coming from the EVM side of things, there are so many centralized scanning solutions, right? And especially
Hmm.
with Bitcoiners, that doesn't fly. So if you look at Botanix and our launch back in early July, you will see that we launched with a federation of 16 orchestrators. And if you look at that list, you will find names like Galaxy Digital, Chorus
Hmm.
One, Kiln, right? And you can find that on our X page. You will find the full list of the 16 validator nodes. I'm not going to go through all of them.
Yeah.
That's really
I
the
remember
coolest.
Galaxy, Fireblocks, Alchemy. There was definitely some big, very recognizable names. UTXO, like yeah, there's quite a few on there. And when you say federation or federators, those are basically like validators within the ecosystem, right?
Yes, they are, because what we're doing is we're running a proof of stake network on top of proof of work, right? So we're going to
Yeah.
get the
Okay.
security getting through the proof of work, and then we run a proof of stake chain where these 16 are validator nodes, as you know it from any proof of stake chain. Exactly.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
we launched with a federation just for this point of decentralization from the get-go, because we feel that this is just a prerequisite for any Bitcoiner to even look at you, right? If it's a centralized
Yeah.
solution, it's like, no, why would I look at this, right? Because, right, what we're in here for is to make a Bitcoiner deploy some of their valuable stack on a productive ecosystem, right? So we want to make you feel secure. So second point, security. One piece is to have a decentralized system, but then how is it secured? If there's a centralized honeypot, which so many scaling solutions have, right? It's no
Yep.
good that it's decentralized, right? So how do we solve this? And this is a roadmap, right? So people can look into this. So it's not fully built out yet, but I only, because of the time that we have here, talk about the end states that we end up with, right? Which is
Okay.
that we actually use the Bitcoin hash rate as the most secure random number generator in the world to randomly select a set of multisigs for every Bitcoin block that brings in Bitcoin from native L1 onto Botanix. Let me walk you through it, how that works, right? Is that usually the assets on the scaling solutions are secured by one multisig, which is, okay, founders, if they wanted to, they can rack you, right? How it works with Botanix is that if someone wants to bring over Bitcoin, the validators that I talked about earlier, they run Bitcoin
Hmm.
full nodes, but they also run nodes on the Botanix network. So whenever there is a multisig created to secure Bitcoin on Botanix, this is done by the Bitcoin hash rate, and they randomly select a set out of these 16 validator nodes to secure your Bitcoin. What that leads to is that there's not one multisig securing your Bitcoin, but in the end, there are tens, hundreds, and thousands, depending on the
It's
age of
like
the chain,
unlimited. Yeah.
securing your Bitcoin, right? And what that leads to is something that we call forward security. And that is that usually proof of stake chains, they are at risk of the 51% attack, right? We all know about this, right? That
Once
someone,
they're compromised, they're compromised. Full chain.
exactly. When that happens on Botanix, you don't have the same attack vector because all the Bitcoin on a chain from the past, they are secured by different sets of multisigs that you can't attack. Yes, you can attack the future, right? But you will
Hmm.
detect this pretty quickly. So at least you don't have the big attack vector of the 51% attack. So, and this is a second big thing for us.
That's very interesting. I guess I think I want to say you've mentioned that before, maybe at the ETH Denver panel, and it's something that kind of stuck with me just because it's a very unique way. So just to clarify, when you bridge BTC from L1 from Bitcoin to Botanix, every time it's automatically spinning up new multisig to secure that BTC when it transfers over.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Okay,
And we can put
that's
there in the show notes, right? Link to our bridge, right? That's our
so
proprietary tech that we've been working on. That's
yeah.
exactly it.
That is awesome. Okay, that is very unique, and I think that's something that I definitely haven't heard of before, and I can understand why Bitcoiners may be a little bit more interested in this methodology as opposed to. I mean, there are some other various like L2 solutions, and they all kind of have their own methodology when it comes to security, but this is definitely something unique, and something that feels a little bit closer to home within the Bitcoin ecosystem, in terms of trustlessness, right? Like you technically have to trust that this is secure, but the way that it's operating is generally trustless in its nature, which is great. That's really what we're looking for within Bitcoin.
Yeah.
um,
It's what we're
okay.
aiming for. And I think I need to make a third point because you mentioned Bitcoin alignment and feeling home, which is that we
Yeah.
are fully denominated in Bitcoin, right? Meaning you pay gas fees in Bitcoin, right? This
Hmm.
is sub-cent level or cent level, but you pay gas fees in Bitcoin. However, that means, and we need to get to that at a later point, you also earn returns in Bitcoin.
In
Right?
Bitcoin.
So many
Yeah.
people say real Bitcoin yield, but actually you get the yield in another token. You don't get it in
Yeah.
Bitcoin. With us, you get it in Bitcoin. And maybe I need to bring it full circle. That was the Bitcoiner side, right? The prerequisites that we feel are important to cater to Bitcoiners. However, the other
Hmm.
side is UX and UI, right? That you want to bring to Bitcoiners, which is the EVM
Yeah.
equivalence that we have. Just reminding everyone of what I said earlier, we're running a proof of stake on top of proof of work, right? And with that,
Hmm.
we have EVM equivalence. And when we launched, that was also what was so interesting to a lot of teams. And maybe just to name a few, right? We have Dolomite that people might know from Barachain that launched with us from the get-go. We had the team of GMX launching with us right from the beginning. Of course, then you can
Hmm.
use all the infrastructure from the EVM side. So we're close partners with Chainlink, right? We have Layer Zero, Stargate, and all of the tooling that you are used to, you can now use of Bitcoin. So I think this is where the two worlds come together. And what we're very proud of as well is that next to all the teams coming over from the EVM world, we have a full
Hmm.
ecosystem of teams that are only native to Botanix. And I think why that is so valuable is that knowing, and we can also chat about that, that we don't have a token, right? That means
Yeah.
this is no pay to play. These guys are here because they're visionary aligned. And I think for us, this is so important.
Dude, I love that. I would actually love to ask you a question on that point, right? Because, and I looked at the partners page as I was prepping for this, and I saw like 50 names on there. Some of them, a lot of them are actually very large, very reputable names in the industry. Um, and so I'm curious. I know a lot of new ecosystems, whether they're Bitcoin aligned or not, there's a lot of people building chains. They'll make it EVM equivalent because they want to attract EVM developers and EVM users. But there's still generally like a hurdle, right? Like you have to add a new chain ID and you have to add this stuff into your wallet manually to add a new network, and it's still, bridging is still generally kind of clunky. It's not an easy or fun UX for me to get onto a new chain and experiment. So just curious, what does that process look like with Botanix, and how easy has it been to attract these developers, these protocols, and in turn, how easy or difficult do you think it'll be to attract that kind of attention in terms of user onboarding, especially for like newer to intermediate users within blockchain?
Yeah. Let's start by teams from the EVM side of things, tracking them.
Hmm.
I think deployment is super easy. We really didn't receive any feedback that there are issues with deployment. It's close to equivalence. But then
Cool.
the most important thing is that they really see for the first time the chance to cater to the Bitcoin market. What do we have? August 5th here. What is it? Probably 2.2 trillion market cap of Bitcoin. And teams really vibe with the setup that we talked about earlier of decentralization, security, right? Botanix only being one of 16 validators from the get-go, and then also everything being denominated in Bitcoin, and then the real Bitcoin yield, right? That brings just one example, right? GMX says, how cool is it that now you can use real Bitcoin as collateral for your trades, right?
And do what you've been doing on every other chain.
Yeah. So that's for the onboarding of teams. And then the second part of your question was on retail. And that brings me to real Bitcoin yield, because while our beta mainnet has been live since July 1st, I want to be fair in saying that right now you can't really do anything on Botanix that you couldn't do somewhere else, right? But that's coming. And for us, that's the Bitcoin yield product. And the homepage is actually already live. We can also put that in the show notes. However, the yield piece itself, it's not unlocked yet. So I need to quickly go back to our economic model. And I mentioned that we don't have a token. That means somehow we need to have an economic model that makes Botanix sustainable, right?
Yeah. Where's this yield coming from?
Yeah. So I think that's what I like so much, being the BD person at Botanix, that I can transparently talk about it. And it's so easy to understand, right? So usually the transaction fees that happen on a chain go 100% to the foundation behind that chain, right? With us, we say, look, we take a cut of it. However, we actually hand back 50% of all the fees that are accruing in the ecosystem to holders of the LST in our ecosystem. Meaning, right, like quick reminder, you stake your Bitcoin to secure the proof of stake chain that we're running. And in return, you receive what we call stBTC. The asset stands for stake Bitcoin. It's an LST like you know it, right? And when you hold that assets, you are eligible for 50% of all the fees that accrue in the Botanix ecosystem. So you can look it up in the Explorer. Easy, you can see how much TBL is on chain, and you just divide the fees that were accrued in the last week, month, whatever, through the TBL, and you know what the APY is that you can gain natively on the Botanix chain.
You know, I want to ask you more questions about this, but you just made it too easy to understand that I don't really have any questions about this, which is crazy. Mainly because when you have that question of, is it sustainable? Where is the yield coming from? There's generally a lot of like, well, let me explain, and like a bunch of overcomplicated crap behind it. And you've made it very, very simple. So you bring Botanix, or you bring Bitcoin over to Botanix, you stake it to help secure the proof of stake chain, and then to earn rewards, it's the transactions that everybody is paying, which are transparently logged. You can see it on the Explorer. You know how much has been spent in transaction fees as a whole. You know, half of that is going to stakers, is going as yield to people that have staked Bitcoin to secure this chain. It's like it's so easy. Like, it just makes sense. And I see why you got so excited. You're like, I love talking about this. I love doing BD for this, because it's really easy for me to explain. People understand it. There's no like, I don't have to try to sell you snake oil. Like, I'm just explaining what is very simple, which makes sense to me, and hopefully it makes sense to you. And it's very easy to get across. So that was
I don't know about you, but when you mentioned your past career, right? I don't know how many companies you've worked for where there is a vision statement, but you never felt that there is any connection to your day-to-day work, right? So
yeah.
I started here with saying, like, we build for a world running on Bitcoin, right? And the economic model is actually reflecting that, saying that either there's going to be a financial ecosystem that runs on Bitcoin. If so, there's going to be a lot of fees, and you can earn a yield, right? If there's no native financial ecosystem on Bitcoin, then yeah, Botanix will have a hard time, right? But we're here for that future, right? And I think if you look under the hood, you know that mostly yields anywhere else are just coming from an inflationary token. So that's why I'm so excited about it, right? We started the whole conversation from learning about the traditional financial ecosystem. And I'm not here to repeat it, but to build the future that I want to live in, right?
Dude, absolutely. I have a lot of respect for that. And I really like your mentality and how you approach not only working for Botanix, but how you analyze whether this is a good opportunity for you, which it's really funny because that's really how I look at any new career opportunity or any company I work for, or even like a project that I want to help support or work on or something is I really try to take a step back and see like, can I sell myself on it? Do I actually believe this? Do I want to purchase this thing? Do I want to use this thing? Do I really want to be a part of this? And if that is true, if I get really excited about it myself, then I can turn around and sell it to the rest of the world because I know I'm not selling, like I said, snake oil. Like I'm not selling something just to sell something and make money. I'm selling something because I truly think that it has some value. I believe it's a worthwhile product, ecosystem, technology, whatever the case is. That's what got me into crypto, and that's what really gets me excited about Bitcoin. And I'll be honest, I've seen Bitcoin being put to use, especially in like staking protocols. There's like new things that are coming across that I think are very interesting, definitely very valuable. But the way that you've explained building an entire ecosystem around Bitcoin, like I've heard the idea multiple times. This is the first time I've heard it executed in such a simple, elegant way that just it sounds like it just works. And I'm really excited to get into the Botanix ecosystem and really mess around with it. And because I stake Bitcoin just for fun in a couple of different protocols just to see how it works. So yeah, Botanix is going to be the next one. Can you actually tell me what would be the best wallet for me to use to engage within the Botanix ecosystem? If I want to go bridge like $100 worth of Bitcoin and stake it, what would be the easiest route for me to do that today?
Well, really use whatever you're used to, right? I mean,
Okay.
we do a campaign right now, 2100 campaign, and we can also link to that. There, we're collaborating with OKX as a partner, right, for a preferred wallet.
Okay.
But then you use MetaMask, Rabi Wallet, your preference.
I see. I was gonna say, yeah, I see like a bunch of stuff on here. I see Tomo, I see Rabby, um, and then 2100 is basically like the gamified front end to like get into the ecosystem and to see what all is going on, right? Like I saw the interface yesterday, but I haven't had a chance to like bridge any Bitcoin over and do anything yet. So I'm gonna get to that today. But yeah, how did that concept come about? I think my team is doing something very similar about a gamified front end to really get people to engage in the ecosystem, learn a little bit more about what you're doing, and to do it in like a visually appealing and fun way that hopefully hooks the end user a little bit, and they stick around a little bit longer and mess with more pieces of the ecosystem. But what launched that idea? What got 2100 on the roadmap?
Yeah, I think there we're coming back to the point of uh, the user experience that we want to
UX.
bring
Yeah.
to Bitcoiners, right? And the user interface. We want to go beyond all the sophisticated people that are already in crypto, right? So
Hmm.
we want to make it fun and easy. And basically, what this campaign does is, in a fun way, just explain Botanix and all the teams working with us and building on Botanix. So yeah, it doesn't need
Cool.
to be always so technical and hard to learn about things. So that's our goal there.
Yeah. Awesome. I mean, you got to make it fun, right? And like I said, that's kind of what we've been ideating on the same thing and building kind of a gamified front end to make it easier for people to engage in your ecosystem. So I respect that. All right, we're going to hop into the last section of this conversation. We're going to talk a little bit about your future vision for Botanix. So beta mainnet just went live in July 2025. What do you see as the next big milestone for Botanix? Generally, we'd like to talk about what do you see in the next year, even in 3 to 5 years. But seeing as you guys are so new in mainnet, how do you see the progression of the ecosystem? What do you see happening within the next 6 months or so, I'd say?
Yeah. So definitely Alpha Mainnet is around the corner. And this will be in tandem with the unlock of the Bitcoin yield product that we talked about. So this
Okay.
is the next big milestone for us, right? Where people will actually be able to experience real Bitcoin yield. So that's the thing that we're working towards, and it will come soon, right? And what I mean by that is, right, have a look out. I think we're probably talking within the next 2 to 3 months that will be live. And then the other piece is we talked about the prerequisites for being appealing to Bitcoiners. What's also on the roadmap is that we're going to open up our validator set. So, I mean, in Bitcoin, I only know of Blockstream that has a federation of 15, I think, but not aware of anything else that is as decentralized. But for us, that's only the start. We want to go into hundreds of validators. And we already have a good lineup from the first discussions around the first federation. So unfortunately, not everyone could join. So we're going to expand that network. And then also we're going to enable permissionless staking. So lots of things happening. But I think for now, just look out for the Bitcoin yield product and Alpha Mainnet hitting the market soon.
All right. Bitcoin yield product. I think that's what a lot of people are going to be excited about. I'm definitely excited about it. A quick question. So you said you will be expanding the federation. You'll have more validators. Do you see that opening up to the public? Like, I run a Bitcoin node off of my TV back here, if you can't see it in the corner. Is that something that will I be able to run a Botanix node or become a validator for Botanix if I want to in the future? Or is that something that's going to be restricted to like infrastructure companies and like professional enterprise grade companies in the space?
Yeah, no, I think as a Bitcoiner, I would just love that, right? And at some
That would be
point,
cool.
that should be the case, right? Everyone will be able to run a node, but not in the next iteration. The next iteration will probably have a longer list of these reputable players that we already touched upon. Maybe bring it up to 100 validators, something like this. But the goal for the long term is that anyone could also join. Yes.
Dude, that will be awesome. I will definitely keep it on my radar to see when that happens so that I can upgrade my Bitcoin node into a Botanix Bitcoin node. All right, cool. Well, honestly, man, I think you do a great job of explaining things in layman's terms in ways that anybody can understand it, whether they're technical or non-technical. And I really, really appreciate that because a lot of times that's what I need. I'm a nerd. I like to learn about the technical stuff, but I'm definitely a non-technical person at the beginning. So when you make things very easy to understand, I appreciate that, and I know that our listeners will as well. To end it off, I do have to ask you, I know you said you hadn't thought of any hot takes, but you got anything on your mind that's going to ruffle some feathers?
It's probably not as extreme, but I want to bring it full circle to the beginning of our conversation where we talk about what brought us to Bitcoin. And I talked about hard money and we talked about currency debasement. And now if you think about it, what we're bringing to market here is not just hard money, but you can actually earn yield on it. So once you're in your journey to Bitcoin, right, and you try to wrap your head around that not only your money can't be debased, but also you can now earn yield on it if there is a whole economy around it. For me, that's mind-blowing. I hope for others it is too. Let's just wrap it at that.
Dude, I think that's a great hot take at the end. We should just take all of our money, put it into Bitcoin, and hopefully we'll all start earning some yield on it in the near future. Philipp, I just want to thank you so much for being here today, for speaking with me, for explaining more about Botanix, the vision, and how people can really start getting some value out of their Bitcoin and really engage in the Botanix ecosystem. Before we hop off, I just want to let the folks know if you have any questions, you can visit the Botanix website at botanixlabs.com. And then where else can they find more information? Where can they connect with you? If you have any other links or places you would like for people to see Philipp, would you mind sharing with us real quick?
Yeah, people call me crazy up. I actually go by my real name on Twitter. So you will find me at Philipp Weiling if you want to reach out to
Philipp
me.
with the two P's. Philipp with the two P's.
1L, 2Ps, yes. And then also for everyone from the traditional world, right, you will also find me on LinkedIn, where I actually have the first outreach of a lot of institutional players, banks that are interested in chatting. So both of them are probably the easiest way.
Awesome. So you got Philipp Weiling on Twitter, on LinkedIn. And if you guys want to check out the website, again, it's botanixlabs.com. Philipp, again, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your time and all the information you shared with us today. Hopefully I get to run into you soon at another conference, man.
Yeah, it was fun. Thanks you for having me.
All right. Absolutely. We will talk soon. Thank you so much.
Take care. Bye.